So we continue to hear from Seneca, a letter to his mother, detailing how Nero engineered the death of his own mother. He says this, he being Seneca. Agrippina was overcome with triumph, and could it be with maternal satisfaction on the letter she'd received from her son. This was more than she ever thought to receive from her ungracious son. She robed herself in beauty and flew to Nero, who met her tenderly, who treated her with rapt and loving attentions, who begged her advice on matters of state, who gazed at her till tears glittered in the woman's antimonial eyes. And when the visit came to an end, the son embraced his mother as if he might never let her go. He whispered, "Best of mothers," then kissed her. He kissed, he said, the breast that suckled me. Agrippina boarded the ship with a light foot and a soaring heart. The starry night matched her mood. She and two others entered the cabin and sat, a maid named Acerona and her treasurer, Creperius Gallus. And so the boat cast off. The oars pulled toward open water. The sail took wind and opened. But Agrippina was Agrippina even to the end, and Nero has suffered horrors for it. For the roof of the cabin came down as was planned, followed by plates of lead, and Gallus died immediately in the fall, but Agrippina was only grazed. Instantly and completely, she knew this was more than a mere accident. She and her maid crept out on deck, just as the crew went rushing in a single body starboard. The hole in the hull had failed to open. They wanted to capsize the boat. It tipped terribly, and it pitched Agrippina and Acerronia into the sea. Acerronia began to scream. "I'm the emperor's mother," she screamed. "Help me, help me!" Sailors leaned over and spotted her form in the dark water. They threw her a line. She grabbed it. They drew her into the boat. At the same time, Agrippina was stripping herself of her robes and treading water among the waves. She would never have shouted. She would never have identified herself to men she did not know. This woman had swum more savage seas than these and had survived. The sailors pulled the maid out of the water up to the gunwale, then raised an oar and cracked her across the head. Acerronia, the maid, sighed and slipped into the darkness. Silently, Agrippina contemplated her own execution, since it was she they thought they were dispatching. Then she turned and swam. Swam for sure, that woman did, and saved herself alive. The first word Nero received that night was from certain sailors bewailing the loss of poor Agrippina drowned at sea. The second word was brought by a messenger from Agrippina's villa. "We experienced some trouble at sea," the mother's message said, "but have no fear for me, my son. I escaped grave injury, only bruising my shoulder a bit. As much as you wish to come and comfort me, don't. I am well. I just need rest." Nero was horrified. He sent for me and for Anicetus, the plot maker, and he commanded the messenger to tell the story of Agrippina's salvation over and over, as if whipping himself. His eyeballs gaped. His body shivered. He kept clawing at his beard and moaning, declaring himself to be a dead man, while I was hearing the distant rumble of the mountain coming down. "What do we do? What do we do?" Nero kept saying to the wind. I had nothing to offer, nothing to say. Anicetus, on the other hand, began to act even before he spoke. He drew a dagger, then bent and slid it swiftly across the floor till it caught between the messenger's feet. Immediately he leaped up, crying, "Help! Help! Ho! A murderer! A murderer!" He launched himself at the messenger and knocked him hard in the head. Then, "This," he said serenely, "is what we do, my lord. We arrest this man sent by your mother to stab you in your own apartments. And now, right now, with your permission, I rush to her villa and kill her for this treachery." Nero, ghastly white and mindless, nodded. Anicetus set off on a swift horse with several soldiers and one centurion. They stormed the villa. They broke into Agrippina's private rooms, finding her washed and dressed for sleeping. She, for her part, recognized death in the assassin's eyes. The centurion drew a dagger. Agrippina stepped backward to the wall. She took the hem of her gauzy gown in two hands and tore it open from throat to waist. Here was the treasure with which she purchased the kingdom. "Ventrum ferri," she said, "strike for the stomach." The centurion obeyed. He plunged the dagger down to its hilt, and Agrippina sank to the floor without a cry. Nero, as I say, has forced his majority. He who has no mother cannot be a son. He's no longer a boy, and perhaps this was the only way the princeps could have accomplished it. But he was not free at first. He was morbid. He lingered away from Rome, fearful that matricide was the single crime the people would not accept, even in a monarch. And now, O virtuous mother, I must confess, one of the more grievous signs that the world is changing. This one in me. I have been milled in the wheels of these present events. And if I, in my supreme contempt for fortune, can't remain unpulverized, who can? In order to prepare for Nero's return to Rome, I wrote the Senate a letter under his name. I am a letter writer. That's what I do. And I do it well. I've written many a letter and many a speech on Nero's behalf, most of them justifiable. Even this one I justified while writing it, for I sought to preserve some influence over the imperial lion for use in the future. If I did not help him here, I reasoned, I'd never help hereafter. See what a merchant fortune is? Selling the greater good for a lesser evil? And I paid with an egregious letter. I recounted not the story of Agrippina's messenger, not the story he had told us, but rather the one we told on him. About his dagger, about her plot to murder her son. I wrote that she, afraid of the judgment about to befall her, had committed suicide. And then I described in detail all the atrocities she committed during her life, particularly by means of the enfeebled Claudius. These were, of course, not false. These constituted a realistic justification for her ending, it seemed to me. As she lived, so had she died. Nero's refusal to let her share his rule, I wrote, had so embittered her that she opposed every gift he made to the soldiers and the people. I characterized him as grieved by the absence of his mother, but magnanimous enough to recognize that all the world would benefit thereby. My lies persuaded no one, and Nero's name meant nothing. Everyone knew I had written the letter, and now I'm accused of killing Agrippina too. My dear, my good mother, I think I am not your son anymore. Forgive me, then go peacefully away. For neither am I Nero's advisor. No greater good was gained by the sale of my soul. At the end of events, Nero has emerged so vastly popular, he sees no need for teachers, guides, counselors of any sort, and I've lost all influence. When finally the lion returned to Rome, it was astonishing how gladly the people received him. They ran out to the country to meet him. They applauded all along the way, playing music on 1,000 instruments, dancing, throwing blossoms at the emperor's cortege and crying, Nero Divinus, Nero Divinus. Astonishing, I say to everyone, including Nero. He truly had not anticipated such a reception, but his astonishment lasted only half the way home, for then I saw his expression change. The sun rose in his face. He beamed. He accepted this dazzling apotheosis as something due to him. And by the time he entered his palace, he and I had arrived at the same conclusion, though his merriment was my misery. If, we realized, to commit this most wicked of sins, if to murder his mother had only increased the people's devotion, what could Nero not do and get away with it? Why, he could do anything. Anything. The world has a new God, Mother. This is the point of my painful letter to you. Incurvat in se. Our deity is self-absorbed, worshiping himself alone, attentive to none but his whim and his will only. He fed on his mother, he'll feed on his people. A shadow is falling upon us wider than Rome and darker than death itself. It is time, it is altogether time for your departure. The world is not worth your habitation here, and I shan't linger long behind you. Mother, do not fear the going. I don't. See what a muddy burden our bodies are to us, something like ropes and fetters to keep us here. How sweet to snap them loose. I shall die, you may surely say with ease, because you mean thereby I shall cease to risk sickness and pain. I shall cease to risk prisons and hatred and disappointments and guilt and death. I'm not so silly as to sing the old soothing lullabies of Epicurus, who used to say that the fears of hell are all idle fears, that there is no Ixion bound to his wheel, no Sisyphus rolling his boulder uphill. You left those tales behind you, my darling, more than 70 years ago. Three-headed Cerberus doesn't scare you anymore, nor do the shadows, nor do the white sprites that cling to their bones like a mist. I'm joking. These are the tales you told me when I was a child, remember? And do you remember how we laughed then? Do you recall the blessed medicine of your laughter? But this is not a joke. It's the most sacred argument I have to offer. Either death obliterates or else it sets us free. If we are released, Mother, if we can drop this muddy burden of the body, better things await us at the end of the lightsome flight. And if we are obliterated, well then, nothing remains. Good and bad alike are gone, and there is no knowing hereafter. Farewell, my dear. Remember our laughter. Remember the green days and all our baby tales. Recall my childhood hopes for a moment, for only a moment, and then farewell. We end the world by ending ourselves. In a stroke, we vanish suffering and war and every calamity. Nothing need remain. Farewell.